Well, we're the historic Elitch Gardens Theater. The first question I always have to ask is, how many of you ever came to Elitch's when Elitch's was located here? Yay! Oh, great. Okay, so you actually know this space. Even more specific, how many of you ever came to a show at the theater? All right. Do any of you remember who you saw? There were some pretty big stars.
He's asking Park.
Bob Hope? Oh, wow. Fantastic.
He has a good story about Bob Hope if you have 30 seconds.
Sure.
Well, basically, all the people were coming in, and they were crowding, they were sitting everywhere and everything, and pretty soon they were sitting kind of up on the stage in the aisles, and the director who was running the show, I said, you need to do something about that. Because I was a young firefighter, but I was in uniform.
Oh, yeah.
Bob Hope came over and said, what is the problem? And I said, well, these people can't be in the aisles. He says, he told the director, whoever was running the place, whatever that guy says, do it.
Listen to the guy in your ear.
That was about 59.
Wow, that's great. Anyone else remember any stars you saw here?
I remember the
I think
show.
it was Billy Crystal.
Oh,
I think.
maybe. I don't.
Probably 40 years ago.
Yeah, I don't have a memory of him being here, but it's possible. We had a lot of folks. We had folks like Bernadette Peters, a big Broadway star now. She was here when she was about 18 years old. Grace Kelly was here when she was about 18 years old. So yeah, a lot of people went on to be big stars. So it's possible he was. Yeah, very cool. Well, we're going to give you a little tour and a little introduction to the theater, and we're going to start out here. We're going to talk a little bit about the history. Then we're going to go inside. We're going to talk about the alumni. We've got a little hall of fame of some of the biggest names that came here. And then we'll go sit down in the theater and tell you more about Mary Elitch and her beautiful gardens. So this is Patty. My name is Greg, and this is Patty, and Patty's going to get us started.
Hi, welcome to the Historic Elitch Theater. So glad you guys could come today. I have personally...
Can I interrupt you? I'm so sorry. I'm going to interrupt you for 1 minute because we're about to be joined by a couple folks. So rather than starting, we'll wait 1 second. This is actually our board of directors is having our board retreat today, and so you'll see our little table set up on the stage. But so our board members are going to come and join us. This is the Highlands Ranch Historical Society.
Yes, Highlands Ranch.
Thank you. One of your fellow ranchers.
I also live out there.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Oh, yes, for sure.
So they make this commute regularly. So yeah. So Patty will get us started on the history here.
Okay, so again, welcome to the Historic Elitch Theater. It's a very near and dear place to my heart as I grew up in North Denver. I worked here as a teenager. Yeah, I came to plays in here with my mom, so she loved it here too. I just want to talk a little bit about the outside structure. So the theater as we see it today stands pretty much like it did in 1891 when it was built. 1891, that's 134 years ago, okay? It became a member of the League of Historic Theaters in 1974, and then it was on the National Register of Historic Places in 1978. You may have seen the plaque out here. So that being said, the reconstruction had to adhere to very strict standards because it was part of the National Historic Society. So they had to basically rebuild everything as it was. So every rafter, every bit of it, posts, everything had to be as it was in 1891. It couldn't be updated for anything like that. So there's some original boards that are actually underneath the ticket booth there. Those were salvaged. The rest were replicated to fit in with the original plan. The cupola, which is up on top, was a long-time home to pigeons. Many, many pigeons. So when restoration began, they had to, at a cost of $75,000, they had to remove all the guano and foxes had made their dens inside the building, so that was a mess to clean up. The stairways were too steep, so those had to be a little more standardized. Structural timbers were actually sistered so they could maintain the original look of the theater.
One of the examples I'll give while we're out here is you see all these little the rafters here. They have that little decorative tail right on the end, just a little block tail on the end. One of the best examples of the process is we weren't allowed to order, 200 of those mass produced. We had to order, I think those are like 2x8s maybe. We had to order a pallet of 2x8s, and then each one of those had to get taken down and traced and then put back up. So if this rafter is half an inch longer than this one, the replacement had to be that level of detail. That is the level of detail they require. For us to make any changes to the theater, because it is a historic structure, we have to go through various review processes. The example I like to share with that is these gates on the steps. About 2 years ago, we had issues with people sleeping at the top of the stairs, and so we wanted to add those gates. It took us 9 months to get approval just to add those gates. And so that gives you an idea of the process for a historic structure. It's a huge process. If you're the ones doing it, it's a huge pain in the butt. But the nice thing is after it's done, for those of us looking at it now, is what's here is authentic. You know that this looks like it was because they made us do it exactly like it was. So, and in fact, we have a person here, Rochelle, who has been our point person on much of that. She's been the one to call them and go, we need a gate. And 6 months later, we still haven't approved our gates. So.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, our board has spent a lot of time with this. But yeah, the great thing is we know that this is pretty authentic. So 1900, Mary Elitch would have been standing right here and looking at this, and this is what she would have seen. So it's pretty cool.
That's what's so amazing. So a little history about Mary and John Elitch. They got married, and Mary was only 16 and wasn't the most approved by her father. They married in California. John was several years older than Mary, and he had experience in owning businesses and some theater experience. John and Mary left California. They were looking for somewhere that had trees, plenty of space for a zoo and gardens. That was their plan all way back then, way before things actually started happening. They arrived in Denver in 1882. They spent 5 years searching for the right spot to make their dream come true. During that time, they ran restaurants downtown Denver, stocked up their money so that they could go ahead and purchase some property. So in 1890, they opened the gates for the public to enjoy the gardens and zoo. Now at that time in 1890, the theater was an open theater with just like almost canvas tent sides to it. So it wasn't this structure, but 1 year later, this was here. Okay, so that in 1 year they managed to do that. It was kind of scary for Mary. The opening day that was scheduled was downpouring rain. And so she was very disappointed, and then some guy came up on, wasn't it horseback?
Yep.
And he said, open the gates, they're all of Denver is coming. They were on the trolley cars, they were on,
Every wagon, every carriage in Denver was headed this way.
Yeah, so the grief was quickly dispersed to having a great day. And they actually, I think they made what's that first day?
The first day we don't have, but the first year.
First year, that's right.
Yeah, the first year, their first summer, so May 1st to end of September, they made $35,000, which in today's dollars would be about $1 million. So in 1890, $35,000 was a lot of money they made in just about 5 months of their first 5 months in business.
Okay, so what the park included at that time was animal enclosures. Mary got all of these animals, bears, lions.
They had coyotes, they had 8 monkeys.
Ostriches.
The bear pit was right about where that white pickup is. That's where the bear pit hung out.
So let's see. Yeah, she'd get down in that bear pit and she'd interact with the animals for the customers. So she raised them from babies, so they knew them well, they were fed well. She never had they never had any children of their own, so she was just all out about animals and children. That was her focus.
She always said she didn't have children because the children of Denver were her kids.
Isn't that sweet? Okay, so an Elitch farmhouse later repurposed as the Orchard Cafe. I don't know if any of you might remember that. And then the water was provided by the Rocky Mountain Ditch Company, which runs underground right now. Newspapers all over the states were advertising what a great place this was for families. You know, again, this was 1890. You know, this was before people had access to any kind of, you know, public entertainment venues in the area and things like that. So people were real excited to come. The first summer they held vaudeville productions here, and let's see. Oh, and they also had orchestra and band concerts to entertain everyone. She filled her zoo with all of her lovely animals, and even one of her lions was used as the model for, that was used as the model for the Chicago Institute of Art. So, artist, why don't you tell that story?
Have any of you been to the Chicago Institute of Art? There's two big stone lions out front. They're known as like the Michigan Avenue lions, I think. They're pretty famous lions. So the guy got the commission to sculpt those lions, and apparently if you're a sculptor, you need to be able to like measure their legs and tail, and you need them to sit still so you can see the shadows and all of that. So he went around, he could not get any lions to sit still for him. And so finally someone said, go out to Denver, Mary Elitch's lion will do anything she wants. And so he came out here, Mary got her lion Rex to pose for him. He was able to go in, measure the lion's tail, and Rex sat still while he sketched him. And so yeah, Mary, in her biography, she talks about Rex is the model for those two lions out front of the Art Institute. So.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. And she has a couple of those stories of the some of her animals that went on to become quite famous. Her ostrich, she had an ostrich that would pull her around the park in a cart, and it became such a phenomenon. There was actually an article in a newspaper in London that had a picture of this crazy woman being pulled around by an ostrich, and so yeah, but her animals loved her. So.
And she became very famous worldwide.
She really did.
She was the only woman first woman, I should say, to run and operate a zoo and an amusement park. You know, so she was way before her time on that one. She had orchards of beautiful trees, fruit trees, vegetable gardens, and the greenhouses that brought her flowers to everyone in this area and across the United States. At one time, I think they were shipping 700,000 carnations to the East Coast. So that's a pretty good business.
One of the largest carnation distributors back in the 1920s and 30s. Elitch's was one of the largest distributors in the country.
Some of you that were here years and years ago might remember the beautiful clock that she had made with the flowers. Remember how pretty that was? I love that.
And they had a garden that spelled out not to see Elitch's is not to see Denver. Spelled that out in flowers, and we attempted that.
It lasted one summer.
Yeah. When you're leaving, you'll see on our grass lawn over there, you can see there's still a circle there. It's really hard to spell things with flowers.
It takes a daily landscaper to keep them up.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work, and we did not have any of that skill. And so, by the end of the summer, it just looked like pretty flowers. But you certainly couldn't get any words out of it. Yeah.
So Mary, she established a Children's Day, and this was totally free. She had more than 2,000 children arriving, and she conducted the whole thing. She had crafts for them. She had fun-filled activities, and she provided lots of educational things for the kids, and that was a free thing. This was Mary Elitch. So
she said one time she had 3,000 kids show up. 3,000 kids showed up for Children's Day, most of them without parents. Wow. She says that the parents would put their kids on the trolley and say, drop them off at Elitch's, and the kids would come and spend the day. And she had enough staff to cover it, and they had activities for all 3,000 kids.
Okay, so she even published a newspaper with future events, and she wrote children's stories and magazine articles, and she also studied music. She was a pretty well-rounded gal. She was a darling of the Denver Post and one of the most highly regarded women in Denver. She was known for her generous spirit and her fondness for children and animals. The gardens were a safe haven for children for generations. Yes. They had a very successful first year, as we said previously. She also helped start the Denver Zoo and the Botanic Gardens in Denver. So she was very busy girl.
And we actually, one of our taglines is that this is Denver's oldest cultural venue because this theater and the park and the gardens actually predates all of the big five in Denver are basically the Denver Zoo, the Denver Botanic Gardens, the Denver Performing Arts Center, which started as the Auditorium Theater, which is now the Ellie Calkins, and the Art Museum, and I'm forgetting one, but Museum of Nature and Science. Yeah, those are kind of the big five cultural institutions of Denver. They all came in after this. This was started in 1890, and so it was the first Botanic Gardens in Denver. It was the first zoo anywhere between Chicago and California, and then the theater was one of the primary theaters in Denver, and the largest theater at the time. They did eventually have the Tabor Theater, which was larger for many years, but yeah, this really predates all of the existing culture that was here for many years. And the amazing thing too is that this is still here. Those are these established institutions. This is older than the Brown Palace. It's older than the state capitol. It's older than most of the buildings downtown. And those are all stone and brick. Here we have a wooden building that has lasted longer than most of these buildings in Denver. So yeah, it's pretty phenomenal. This is still here.
So the last thing I'll share with you before we go inside is after their first summer, John, who always loved acting and traveling shows, he took a group of people and they did many places in Colorado before moving on to California, and he actually contracted pneumonia and died the year this opened. So it was Mary's from then on out.
So we leave you with that cliffhanger. We're going to go inside and we're talk a little bit more about Mary in there. But yeah, here she is, 35-year-old widow. They're 1 year into this venture, and she is left running a zoo, a botanic gardens, and a theater at the age of 35 in a time when women didn't run any one of those, and certainly not all three. And then the worst part about all of it is they had spent all their money on the theater and on John's traveling theater troupe, so she was also left destitute.
Wow.
So big cliffhanger there. Let's go inside. We're going to go inside and go to the right. Yeah.
Do you know how much it cost when they first opened it to see the gardens in the zoo?
You know, we have a picture of the entrance that has the early entrance has a thing saying 5 cents.
Okay.
I don't know if what year. We think that was late 1890s. Late 1890s. So, but I'm guessing it was in that same range, about 5 cents when they opened. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's head in here. You mean why or in later years, the parking lot was in the back, and there was that little ride that went out of the parking lot. So that was all out there. That's what the side right now. Trocadero Ballroom was right in front of the theater for years. It got torn down in the 70s, which is years ago. If you all want to come this way, and feel free, there's some seats here, feel free to have a seat, and I talk fairly loud, so you should be able to hear me. And watch your step in those weird slopes.
My daughter was a painter.
Yes, a lot of reasons. Yes. So we're gonna take a quick detour from Mary and Johnny Elitch, and I'm going to tell you about some of the amazing stars that have performed here over the years. I like to start. Some of these aren't very well known, but they're pretty. They have some great stories. One of our oldest alumni is a woman named Maud Feely. Maud Feely was actress. She was born in Denver, and she was declared the most beautiful woman in the world. There was a magazine in France that asked people from all over the world to send in photos, and they got thousands and thousands of photos. And out of those thousands of photos, they picked Maud Feely as the most beautiful woman in the world. And so she got her start acting here. She became very famous. She became a really big star and would tour around for many years. And I have another story I'll share with you in a minute about her. But she was a pretty big name. James O'Neill was here. He's the father of Eugene O'Neill, the playwright. He was good friends with John Elitch, and he was here on opening day in 1890. And he said, when you get your theater up and running, let me know and I'll come back and I'll perform for you your first season. So the first couple seasons at the theater were actually vaudeville. They didn't do regular theater productions, they just did vaudeville shows. But in 1893, Mary Elitch actually decided, why don't I hire a traveling stock company to stay for the whole summer? So back then, at that time, stock companies would travel around the country and they would stop in a town, and a stock company would have 12 to 15 actors, and you would have some stock characters. There would be a leading man and a leading lady. There would be what they called the second man, second lady, which was generally an older couple. And then you would have the juvenile and the ingenue, which would be a younger man and woman. And so those were kind of the 6 main characters of a stock company. And then you had extras who would fill in other roles. So they would come into town, they would do a show for the evening. The next night they would do a whole different show, same actors would do a different show, and then they might stay a third night and do a third show. So it was a way to get theater out around into communities where they didn't have theaters. And so these traveling stock companies had been traveling around and doing this for years. In 1893, Mary decided to hire one of those stock companies to come and stay for the whole summer. And so she had a stock company that came. They stayed for 10 weeks, and they did a different show each week. So the actors stayed for the whole 10 weeks. Then in 1897, Mary actually said, why am I hiring some traveling company? Why don't I hire my own company? So Mary hired her own director, and they hired their own actors. And they actually had the first summer stock theater. This theater is credited as the first summer stock theater in the country. Summer stock has now become a very well-known thing, but this was the first one, and all the history books list this. Elitch Theater was the one that came up with this idea of being just open in the summer and having a resident stock cast. And so one of the things, one time one of the books has a description of the life of a summer stock actor. And this guy was describing his day, the standard day of a summer stock actor. He said they would spend their mornings in their room reading their script for the show in 2 weeks. So they're learning their script for the show in 2 weeks. In the afternoon, they would all gather at the theater and they would rehearse next week's show. And then that evening, they would go to the theater and perform tonight's show. So at any one time, these actors are working on 3 different shows. So yeah, pretty amazing. I couldn't even memorize one. We have actors in the crowd that probably could, but I don't know how they did that. So pretty amazing life. But Elitch's was one of the highlights in the summer stock arena. People all wanted to come here because it was a beautiful place. You got to sit and rehearse in the gardens, sit under the trees, and do all of that. So Elitch was a huge draw for folks. And so James O'Neill, the very first summer of regular summer stock, James O'Neill was the leading man. We have another name here, Antoinette Perry. Does anyone recognize that name? Antoinette Perry.
Tony Awards.
There we go, yay! Only about half the time does anyone know that. So Antoinette Perry is the namesake of the Tony Awards. The full name of the Tony Awards is the Antoinette Perry Awards for Excellence in Broadway Theater. And it's started by the Theater Wing and the producers group of Broadway Theater, and they started it to honor American theater. So Antoinette Perry was actually, she was born and raised in Denver. Mary Elitch in her biography tells a story about little baby Antoinette Perry playing with, I think the Antoinette Perry story is that she was playing with the goldfish. Mary was walking around, and Antoinette Perry, she was walking around with Antoinette Perry's mother, and they look over, and Mary's like picking at the goldfish, and Antoinette's picking at the goldfish. So she grew up here. She was good friends with Mary. She went on to become a very famous actress. But then she got married and she retired for about 20 years. She was married to a guy who ran the Denver Electric Company. And she retired for about 20 years. After he passed away, though, she decided she wanted to get back into theater. So she moved to New York. She started acting. Eventually, she started directing and producing. And she actually was the one who produced or directed the first showing of Harvey, the show about the big bunny, which was written by Mary Chase, who was from Denver, and Mary Chase and Antoinette Perry were friends because they both came from Denver, and so Antoinette directed the first production of Harvey on Broadway. And so Antoinette Perry became very famous. She helped start the theater wing, and then when she passed away from cancer. About 2 years later, they decided to start this award show, and they decided to name it after Antoinette Perry. And so that's how the Tony Awards became the Tonys. And so another big name, speaking of big names, excuse me, is Cecil B. DeMille. Probably have heard that name, yeah. So Cecil B. DeMille, basically one of the founders of Hollywood, one of the best directors ever. He got his start here. He was about 22 years old when he came here, and he was the juvenile for the summer. His brother was part of the stock cast as well that summer. And so he started out as an actor and performed here. One of the great stories, and part of the reason I like to bring up Maud Feely, is because she came back. She wasn't the leading woman the whole summer, but she came back and was the leading lady for a couple productions. So she became friends with Cecil B. DeMille. He was quite a bit younger, but they still became pretty good friends, and they kept in touch for many years after. Later in Maud's life, she became pretty destitute. She was no longer acting. She was living in the performer's home out in California. And Cecil B. DeMille would always give her roles in all of his movies just to get a little money to her. So if you look in the credits of 10 Commandments, Maud Feely's in there. She's got a very small role, but she's in there. And so Cecil B. DeMille always remembered that friendship. And when she passed away, he actually paid for her funeral as well. So for all indications are he was a pretty great guy. He would actually send every year on opening day here at Elitch's, he would send a telegram to the cast congratulating them on being picked to be part of Elitch's Summer Stock Theater. And so he seems like he was a pretty great guy, and he always remembered his time here. He called the Elitch Theater the cradle of American drama. And so yeah, he had a big part of our history. Another big name, Sarah Bernhardt. If you've ever heard of Sarah Bernhardt, she was huge. She was like the Taylor Swift and Meryl Streep and Brad Pitt all put together. She was huge in her day. She was an actress. She was from France, and she was a very popular, very famous actress. In 1906, she was on her farewell tour of the United States, and she came through. She was supposed to go to San Francisco, but 1906, they had an earthquake. So she ended up, Mary Elitch called her up and said, come to Denver for a day, come here. So she ended up coming out here. She was just here for one day. She did a matinee and an evening performance. And the actors, they didn't do the summer stock that night. They canceled summer stock for Sarah Bernhardt's show. So the actors, the story is that the leading lady, leading man, all the actors were like, let me just be the maid in the background dusting, just so I can say I acted on stage with Sarah Bernhardt. And so yeah, so she was as big as it gets, and she came here for one day. People will often ask me who's the biggest star that was ever here. Grace Kelly, Debbie Reynolds, all of these big names. But I was telling me it's probably Sarah Bernhardt is probably the biggest star that was ever here. In her heyday, she was here, and she was huge. Douglas Fairbanks. He was a Denver boy, got his start in Denver. He actually went to East High School. Apparently he got kicked out of East High School. The report says it was something to do with green paint on St. Patrick's Day. I have no more details than that, but yeah, so Douglas Fairbanks, he actually tells the story of when he was 12 years old, his mom always used to read Shakespeare to him. He loved Shakespeare, but he had never seen it performed live. So he says when he was 12 years old, he came to the theater, came to the backstage door, knocked on the door, and asked the janitor, can I clean the stage in exchange for a ticket for tonight's show? The janitor's like, no, it doesn't really need cleaned. So the janitor leaves, comes back a little bit later, and here's this little kid cleaning the stage. So Douglas got his ticket for the show that evening, so he saw his first Shakespeare here. He came back when he was 19, and he actually performed. He wasn't here for the whole summer, but he was here for part of the summer when he was 19 years old. And then, as you know, he went on to be one of the other founders of Hollywood. I always wonder, we have pictures of Douglas Fairbanks and Cecil B. DeMille in Hollywood together. I always wonder if they sat there going, you performed at Elitch's? I performed at Elitch's. They sat and talked about all of it. So yeah, he was a big name. Some other big ones, Harold Lloyd, another Denver guy. He went to East High School. We got a lot of East High School graduates here. Edward G. Robinson, Beulah Bondi, you may recognize. She played Jimmy Stewart's mom in 4 different movies. It's a Wonderful Life and several others. One of the things I was just telling our board folks earlier, we have a lot of a lot of actors who met here and got married and had very successful marriages and lives. One of them was this guy Albert Hackett, and he met Frances Goodrich here. They were both in the stock cast. They went on to become playwrights together, and they actually wrote or script writers. They actually wrote the script for the Helen Keller Miracle Worker. They wrote the Miracle Worker, and then they went on to write all of the Thin Man movies. If you've ever seen any of the Thin Man movies, the two of them met there. So if it hadn't been for Elitch's, we wouldn't have Thin Man movies. So another great couple that met here was Florence Eldridge and Frederick March. Frederick March was here. He was the leading man for 3 years before he became a big star. Florence Eldridge was here a year before him, but then the second year she was here, Frederick March became the leading man. She was the leading lady. They fell in love, and in fact, the theater did not allow married people to act together. They thought people would just think that's not acting; they're just a couple, and so they didn't allow people who were married to act together. So they ran down to Colorado Springs and got married. Thought they did it secretly, but the owners found out. So they fired Florence. They kept Frederick, but they fired Florence. Poor Florence. Of course. And so, right, of course. But yeah, and Frederick March and Florence Eldridge went on to be married, I believe, almost 50 years. They had a wonderful marriage. If you've seen the movie Inherit the Wind, he plays one of the main characters, and she's his wife in the movie. And they acted in like 10 movies together. And so, yeah, another marriage that got started here. Another marriage that got started here, Helen Bonfils and George Soames met here. So Helen Bonfils, if you know the Bonfils name, if you've been around Denver much, you'll know the Bonfils name. Those of you who don't know, Helen Bonfils' father, Frederick Bonfils, started the Denver Post. He founded the Denver Post, became very wealthy, partly due to some kind of shady tactics. There was apparently a lot of, well, if you don't want that story to run, I'll tell you what you have to do. And so he became very wealthy. He had two daughters. He had Helen and May were his two daughters. May, unfortunately, got disowned and disinherited. She married an unsavory man. I know, right? And he was a piano music salesman. And so I have spent the longest time going, how is that unsavory? He sells piano music. Finally found out it's because he wasn't Catholic. That's why. So she was disowned because she married a man who wasn't Catholic. On the other hand, Helen Bonfils, she lived with her parents up into her 40s. She never married. She never dated. She was the very dutiful, good daughter. And so when her father passed away, she inherited everything. She became the head of the Denver Post. May actually did eventually sue and she ended up getting, I don't know, $10 million or something. She did just fine. The Belmar shopping center out there, if you've ever been there, that's out where her ranch used to be. She was a millionaire. She was fine. But Helen was really, really rich. She was the richest woman in Denver. But the thing, she didn't ever want to run the Denver Post. The thing she always wanted to do was act. So within a year after her dad passed away, she came here and auditioned. She auditioned under the name of Helen Barton, and her mom's maiden name was Barton. She auditioned as Helen Barton, and she later said she didn't want anyone to know she was a Bonfils in case she failed. But she was apparently pretty good because she got hired for the summer stock cast. And so she ended up performing here for many years. The third year she was here, George Soames was hired as the director. The two of them fell in love. They got married. And for about the next 20 years, almost every summer, they would come back and he would direct and she would act. Occasionally, he would act as well. One of the great stories, they did a show called The Man Who Came to Dinner. And it's this show about this, I think he's a radio host or a writer, and he's this just horrible, obnoxious, awful person. And he's doing a tour around the country, a little promotional tour, and his agent really wants him to go and visit like this friends of his when they're in this small town in Ohio. So he's complaining that he has to go talk to these, hicks that he doesn't want to talk to. He gets to their house, steps out of his car, and he slips on the ice and breaks his leg. So he ends up moving into these people's house for 6 weeks. And he is just the most horrible man. He treats everyone awful. He kicks them out of the guy gets kicked out of his den, and the guy takes it over. So George Soames played this really awful, horrible guy. And Helen Bonfils plays the nurse. And the nurse is this poor, suffering woman who he just is horrible to. And so apparently the reviews of it talks about the fact Helen Bonfils' entrance into the show. He's sitting in his wheelchair on stage and goes, "Miss Bedpan, get out here!" And out walks Helen Bonfils, the richest woman in Denver. So it was apparently like a pretty, like the applause went on for like 15 minutes because people thought that was so great that he just called Helen Bonfils Miss Bedpan. But yeah, so the two of them came back many, many years. Helen has a big history here. Second to Mary Elitch, she is probably the most important figure to ensure that the theater is still here. In the mid-1960s, the owners of the theater weren't making money on it, the Gertlers, so they actually decided to tear the theater down. And they met with Helen and said, hey, do you want to lease the theater and you can be the promoter there and you can produce shows there? And Helen was like, no, I don't think so. I'm so busy in New York. She was producing shows in New York. And so she's like, what's going to happen? And they're like, we're going to tear it down. And so she's like, okay, I'll produce. And so she took over and produced here for many years. Her producing partner was a woman named Hala Stoddard. They had met here. And they became good friends, and so she and Hala produced here for many years. After Helen passed away, Hala continued to produce her with her husband, Whitfield Connor, who they also met here. Are you seeing a theme? There's a lot of love happening in this theater. But anyway, yeah. So Hala Stoddard and Whitfield Connor produced here all the way up until the end when the park moved. But yeah. So Helen Bonfils has a huge place here. Raymond Burr. Perry Mason was here. He was the leading man for like 2 summers. Wow. One of our other big names, Grace Kelly. Grace Kelly was here. She was just a young 18-year-old. She was the ingenue for that summer. And she actually, the story goes that she got a telegram while she was here saying, come out to Hollywood. I want you to be in this movie called High Noon. You're going to play Gary Cooper's wife. And she initially said no. She said, I can't. I have a contract. I have a contract through the end of the summer at Elitch's. I can't leave. Luckily, the leading man, that Whitfield Connor was the leading man that summer. Luckily, Whitfield Connor sat her down and said, check your contract. You have a 2-week out clause. Give your notice today and get out to Hollywood. So she did. She got out to Hollywood. About a year later, she won an Oscar. About a year after that, she was a princess. It's all because of Elitch's, right? It is all because of Elitch's. But actually, one of the really cool things is that, so Whitfield Connor, as I mentioned, he later became a producer here. And in the archives, History Colorado has all of the archives from the theater. In the archives, there's letters on Princess Grace letterhead, hand-signed by Grace Kelly, went back to Whitfield Connor. She always remembered that this is the guy who helped her get out to Hollywood. So she always kept that in mind and would write to him here. Another big name right next to her, Robert Redford. You'll see, on all of these photos, you'll see there's a date under their name. That's the first date they performed here, the first year they performed here. Many performed for multiple years, but we put the first date they performed here. You'll notice Robert Redford's is a little different. It's the only one that says circa 1957. That's because we don't actually have any proof that he performed here, but he says he did, so we're going to claim him. Robert Redford, I'm not going to fight with Robert Redford. Robert Redford, he said he was a theater student in Boulder, and he says that the summer after he dropped out of CU Boulder, he actually spent the summer working here. And so we don't know if he's not in any programs, so he didn't have a speaking part, so we don't know if he just had walk-on parts, or if he was an usher, or he worked backstage. We don't know what exactly he did, and sadly, he recently passed away, so we won't ever get that question answered. But he has said he worked here, so we will gladly claim him as one of our alumni. One of my other, my other one, I was saying that they all have that 1 year under him. The one other exception, Sylvia Sidney has 2 years under hers. The only reason I put both years is because Sylvia Sidney definitely has the largest span between her first appearance and her last appearance here. She first appeared here when she was a young woman, 1928, and then she came back in 1976. So a 48-year span between her first performance and her next performance here. But yeah, she was one of our favorite alumni as well. Let's move to the other side. I'm going to speed this up so we can go sit down, but there's a couple more I want to share with you. can pull some chairs over, but this half I'll be much quicker. This half, I have a story for pretty much every alumni, but I'm gonna get us down to the seats here. So, but I do want to just show a couple more. One of the things you'll notice is that these later years, there's a lot more famous actors and actresses, a lot more familiar faces. So part of the reason for that was when the summer stock program, they would bring in actors, they would have to commit to the whole summer. So you didn't get any of the big Hollywood leads or anyone for that. In the mid-1960s, when Helen Bonfils took over, she started doing what they called the star package, where they would just bring in some big actor to do like a 2-week production. And so it was a chance for an actor, like you see a lot of TV actors have summers off. So it was a chance for them to get back to their theater roots and do some theater, but they didn't have to commit to a whole tour, or they didn't have to commit to a whole summer. They were able to just come for 2 weeks and do a show. So yeah, we have lots of big names. Some of these folks were here on tours, but most of them were here just on single shows. One of the best ones here, I always say, I wish it was the year before I was born, but 1967, they had Joan Fontaine, Myrna Loy, and Gloria Swanson. 3 of the biggest names in Hollywood were all here that same summer. I can't even imagine, that would have been amazing. We also had some other big stars. Debbie Reynolds was here twice. But she didn't do a play. She actually did like a variety show singing all of her famous songs and all. One of our sad stories, we don't have many sad stories, but one of the sad ones, Brandon DeWild, his final performances on the stage were here. If you don't know that name, Brandon DeWild was the little kid in the movie Shane, or in the movie HUD. If you've seen HUD, he played Paul Newman's nephew. I always say younger brother, but I think he's actually his nephew. He was a very famous actor as a child actor, and then went on to do older roles and all. He was here. He actually he had just been married. He'd been married for a couple weeks. When they came here, his wife actually got sick and was in the hospital. So when the play was over, he stayed in town to be with his wife. Unfortunately, one night, about 2 nights after his final performance, he was traveling down 6th Avenue, and right at Kipling, it was raining, and he rear-ended a truck, big tractor trailer, and he was killed in a car accident. So his final performances were here on the stage. We have some great photos of him backstage, and so yeah, that's one of our sad stories. A nice story was Mickey Rooney was the star that was here the following week, and he did several fundraisers around town for Brandon DeWild's wife, and so he helped out there. But yeah, lots of other big names. Shelley Winters was here. Shelley Winters, I love her, and I'm sad to share the stories because it does not reflect well on her. But the good story is she gave us our first ghost story. So she actually was here. She was standing on stage and she was rehearsing. And in the middle of rehearsal, she stops and she goes, "Would someone get that woman out of my eye line?" And everyone's like, "What are you talking about? There's no one there." And she's like, "Yeah, that woman up in the balcony. She's bothering me." And the director's like, "Shelley, there's no one in the balcony." And so I personally think it was Mary Elitch up there, just kind of watching over her. Mary Elitch should have visited her on her second visit here, because unfortunately, Shelley's second time coming here was a mess. She was apparently drunk most of the time. She hadn't learned any of her lines. She hadn't rehearsed. And so she got up on stage. I've actually read the review in the Denver Post, and it's horrible. She got up on stage opening night, and she would say a line, and then there'd be a really long pause. And then she'd say another line, and there'd be a really long pause. This went on for like 20 minutes. Finally, after like 20 minutes, she looks off stage and says, "I can't hear you." So she's got someone off stage that is prompting her all of her lines. And so the review says that the rest of the show, the entire audience, would hear her line get yelled from off stage, and then she would say it. And then her line would be yelled from off stage, and she would say it. And so, yeah, the reviews are awful. They are horrible. So, yeah, she needed Mary to scare her into doing a better job that time. But anyway, yeah, lots of big names. Ginger Rogers was here. We had Captain Kirk, whose name I'm forgetting. William Shatner was here. So we're going to actually, feel free to look at these as we go down there. We're going to go down this aisle here. We're going to kind of gather down front, and I'm going to, Patty and I are going to continue some stories, and we're going to pass photos. So try to sit within like arm's length of your neighbor. And so go ahead and look as you come, and then come down this way.
Let me look up here and see.
moving my photos. So I'm gonna go searching back for a minute. But yeah, we're gonna now jump back to Mary and John and tell you more.
There's a current play happening right now.
There is, yeah. So this one, there's a show called Bear that's running, and this one is actually not our show; it's a venue rental. So we are just giving them the space, but we're not producing it or anything. It's not our own show. But, yeah. So the show this weekend. Oh, thank you. Yay, thank you, Roberta. So I'm going to pass the photos around while Patty talks, and we'll share some photos with you.
So, with history going forward after John died, in 1893, the silver crash happened. And if you know Colorado history, there were a lot of people here in that mining industry and contributing to the economy with lots of jobs and things like that. But at that time, everybody fell on hard times, and Mary actually lost the gardens at that time. But she was able to buy it back some years later and ran it for the next 25 years. In 1893, also, they had their first summer stock season. She had earned herself a high accolades in Denver, and beyond that, for being such a great businesswoman, because she was way ahead of her time, you know, in women entrepreneurship. She was just fabulous. In 1900, she actually married John Long, who ran the greenhouses. And they left for a 6-month honeymoon, but separated after a few years. So just wasn't John, I guess, you know. So the theater was enclosed, of course, and we said that before, for the second season. So it's the building that we're in today. In 1905, more than 20,000 people passed through the gates on opening day. That's how important this venue was for entertainment for the common people. I should have shown you that poster as we came inside, but it's a big poster that says it was originally called the Elitch Botanical Gardens.
Elitch's Zoological Gardens.
Zoological Gardens, yeah, that's right. So she had all of that going for her. So it was a highly regarded family outing to go to, and no alcohol was allowed. It was a very clean family venue. She ran the gardens until the 1915-1916 season, and then she went bankrupt. But the biggest reason for that was that the World War I was starting. People actually had autos now to take them places for entertainment or outings or whatever. Movies were starting to happen, you know, so she hit it really good at the right time, but then, you know, modern history took over, where she lost the gardens again. She sold it to John Mullen. He brought Mary back. It's funny. She demanded that her name Elitch's always be the name of the park. That she always had this box over here for her and her friends, whoever wanted to come. And there was a small cottage on the property, and that she'd be allowed to live there and given a stipend. You know, so Mary got her way. She got to live in her gardens. She was a happy camper. So she was actually, she died in 1936 and was buried in Fairmount Cemetery next to her husband, John. So nearly every Denver organization claimed Mary. Denver Women's Press Club, Denver Athletic Club, which her husband John had started, the Denver Elks Club, Denver Women's Club, the Garden Club, the Northside Club, and many more. There's photos, and you probably will see, of Mary running around in her rubber-tired roadster. Actually, pictures that ended up in London, Vienna, Paris, and Calcutta of this woman that had started this, you know. John Mollefeld ran the gardens until his sudden death in 1938. Then his son, Arnold Gertler, took over. His sons, Jack and Bud, later joined the operations. So I actually, as a teenager, worked here And we were always on the lookout because I think it was Bud Gertler would be walking by, we all, I can remember that very well.
What year did the amusement park leave the facility?
1994.
94. And what was the reason?
I can't remember 94, 95, but then opened up 95 or 96 down.
They just needed more space?
They
or what?
needed more space. They had 19 acres here, and they were able to move down there. I think it's about 30 acres there. So, unfortunately, it's 30 acres of concrete down there. But all the beautiful gardens did not move with them. But yeah.
So we're gonna, yes.
I got that. Elitch and Highlands Ranch Mansion had something in common. The original building of Highlands Ranch Mansion was built in 1891.
Is that right? That's nice to know. Wow, and that was way far out in those days.
Yeah, Mary called this the country when she said they were looking for a place to live out in the country. They came to this neighborhood, so yeah, that would have really been the country. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, since Paul had mentioned Highlands Ranch, can I just mention a couple of other things and connections with Highlands Ranch Mansion with Elitch's? Not really super long and strong, but back in, I think it was like in 1904 or something like that, one of the owners of the mansion, Highlands Ranch Mansion, was Colonel William Hughes. And he was, depends on which article you read, at one point he was considered the richest man in Denver. Anyway, so he and Mary Elitch contributed to the very first orchestra that they started, or they helped finance the first orchestra.
That's wonderful.
And was that the Cavello was the conductor? Was that one?
Do you think I know all that? ask me what that vestibular is, I can tell you that.
One of the first orchestras to play here was a guy named it's Italian, I can't remember his first name, but Cavello, and he actually ended up marrying Maud Feely's mother. So anyway.
Well, the article that I read it from had all the people of the orchestra, and I didn't even bother printing that.
That's interesting.
And then the other connection, and so then I found several articles where Hughes would be here, so he must have known Mary Elitch a lot. And then another owner of the mansion was Hughes's granddaughter. Who's Hughes's granddaughter, Sandy? I didn't have my coffee this morning. That's why I was yawning. I was like, I can't go without coffee anymore. Annie Clifton Springer. And Annie went to Miss Wolcott's school, finishing school for girls. And apparently every year Miss Wolcott's finishing school for girls had their, like a production here.
I did. I recognize the name, the Wilcox. Yeah.
And so then during the 1 year that Annie was here performing outside or whatever they were doing, her grandfather rented a whole whatever. So obviously,
I like those connections. Those are great connections. Okay, so I'm just going to go briefly over a timeline since it will give us some kind of an idea of what happened in the first, from 1890 to 1994. So 1890 is when Elitch Theater opened. Again, I said it was open air with canvas sides. 1891, a roof and permanent sides were added, and the theater opened for the summer. The Boston Opera Company performed musicals and light opera, vaudeville plays, and of course 1891 is when John died. 1893, the Frank Norcross Company was hired for the full season, and then the silver crash happened, and Murray had to sell but regained it later. 1894, the Anne Hathaway curtain was installed and remained hanging for nearly 100 years. And can you give some history on that?
Yeah, so this Mary Elitch actually had this beautiful curtain made. It was Anne Hathaway was Shakespeare's wife, And Johnny Elitch was a huge Shakespeare fan, and so after he passed away, Mary commissioned this beautiful drape. It was basically the asbestos drape. Back in the day, they would have a curtain that whenever the theater wasn't in use, an asbestos curtain would hang down to keep in case there was a fire, the fire wouldn't spread from auditorium to backstage or vice versa. So this Anne Hathaway curtain was the curtain that would be down most of the time when the theater, they would raise it up about 15 minutes before the show, and they would have an actual curtain that would be used during the show. But yeah, this Anne Hathaway curtain had this beautiful forest scene on it, and in the middle was a little picture of Anne Hathaway's cottage. And so that curtain we actually had for over 100 years. It hung here. When the park moved downtown, the theater was boarded up and closed up for about 10 years. And in that process, we had a bunch of leaks in the roof and a big leak right over that curtain. And so most of the curtain tore. We put it away, we wrapped it up and put it away to try to save it when we were done with the construction. And we actually got it out and started to unwrap, and there was all this dust flying everywhere. Turned out it wasn't dust, it was the paint. 1893 hand-painted curtain. The paint was not meant to last 100 years. And so we had a woman here who was an expert on historic theater curtains, and she was saying, yeah, you were lucky it even lasted 100 years. So sadly, we were very sad to see that one go. It was pretty special.
Yeah, it's hard to lose history.
Yeah.
So in 1896, Thomas Edison, who we all know, showed his new invention, the vitascope, in this theater. Those are the first, these were the first films shown west of Chicago. 1897, the Elitch Gardens Theater Company was formed, making Elitch Theater the first summer stock theater in the country. 12 box seats were added to the theater. And you can see where the box seats are.
Yeah, and now there's 8. There used to be one right up there. There was a third one up top, and then there was a third one down below in the front. But that one was just too crowded, and this one had a horrible view because you were all but under the stage. And so they removed those ones I think it was pretty soon, like within a couple of years after they were put in, they removed those 2 boxes.
Okay, and then in 1899, to start the season, the zoological was dropped from the name, and it officially became known as Elitch Gardens. Many changes were made, so she had to get rid of all the animals. That was one thing. There were electrical equipment, we're replacing gas fixtures, so that was a good thing. 200 additional seats were added. The original seats are these 2 rows down here in the front center.
Well, and actually these 2 are the very original. These are the chairs from 1890. Yeah, we got those about 2 years ago. We got the Wheat Ridge Historical Society called us up and said, we've got these 2 chairs in the barn that everyone has said are Elitch chairs. And I ran over there and I was like, oh, I don't recognize them. And then I realized we have a photo. One of the photos of the Anne Hathaway curtain has these double bench chairs in it, just like this. So those are actually, and we finally got them displayed since our last tour. We've got them out here. So those are the original 1890s chairs. Those are even older than the theater. Even when the theater the first year was kind of basically a tent, those were the chairs they used. And then, yeah, 1899, they put in these wood and iron ones down here. The balcony still has those chairs up there. And then these,
1940, right?
Yeah, these were 1940s. You can see there's a little kind of Art Deco look on the side of them. So yeah, these were put in the 1940s.
Okay, so from 1904 to 1905 is when many of the rides were added to the park, including the famous carousel.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, over the years, the carousel, there's been 3 different carousels. The very first one was actually a steam-powered carousel. But yeah, of the 2 really famous ones, 1905 was the first one. It was PTC number 6. So there's a company called Philadelphia Toboggan Company that makes carousels. I don't know why a toboggan company makes carousels, but Philadelphia Toboggan Company is really famous. There are entire books about it. There are websites about it. They made carousels. They made hand-carved and hand-painted carousels, these beautiful carousels. And so their very first, their 6th one off the line came here and was the first carousel here in the early 1900s. It was here until about the mid-1920s, and then in the 1920s there was new technology. carousels got an upgrade. And the new technology was, rather than just going around, the animals also went up and down. And so Elitch's had to have the fancy newest technology. And so they decided to sell PTC number 6 and get a new one, and get a replacement. PTC number 6, their original carousel, actually got sold to Kit Carson County out in Burlington. And so if you've ever driven out there, there's the Kit Carson Carousel. That has actually got its start here at Elitch's. It was first on these grounds here. The funny story is actually that so they bought it in mid-1920s, they bought it. The county commissioners paid about $1,500 to buy this carousel. The next election, they all lost their election because everyone was so mad that they spent money on a stupid carousel. And it sat in storage for years and years, but years later they restored it, and now it runs all summer long. It's a beautiful one. But yeah, it's still out there. It's actually one of the unique things that's kind of infamous among carousel people because it runs really fast. Like, if you've ever seen it, it really goes fast. You would think it'd be like throwing kids off as it's spinning, but yeah, it's kind of unique for that. But then eventually, when they got their new one here, PTC number 51 is the one that replaced it here, and that one is the one that is still down at the park today. It's actually they're still in use. When the park moved down there, they restored it and
They left the carousel cover.
They left the carousel shell here. That was part of the historic designation, was that they had to leave that here. And so, but yeah, that carousel is still in use. And in fact, I keep thinking we need to go and tell them. So the first year here was 1926. So next year is the 100-year anniversary for that carousel. I don't know that Elitch Gardens pays much attention to their history, so we need to go tell them, your carousel's 100 years old next year.
And we had several events in that carousel.
Yeah. This summer we did some free concerts out there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
Yep.
Beautiful. Okay, so that brings us up to about 1916 when Mary Elitch sold the park. Of course, that was into World War I. And she sold it to John Mulville, whose family ran the park for the next 80 years. In 1917, the Trocadero Ballroom was added to the park. Do you guys remember the Trocadero?
Did you go dancing there? Yeah.
Beautiful place. Beautiful.
We hear as many Trocadero stories as we do theater stories. Like, it was one of the gems of Denver.
It was a grand ball.
All the big names passed through. The Dorsey brothers, Jimmy and Tommy, and Glenn Miller actually did. Glenn Miller, he's a native of Colorado, born in Fort Morgan, and he's one of the only band leaders who didn't.
Did they give tours of that?
It got torn down in the mid-1970s, so it got replaced by a skee ball. tore down this wonderful piece of history. It just, by the 1970s, people weren't really doing a lot of ballroom dancing, a lot of formal dancing. They tried to repurpose it. There was a Beach Boys concert in there. And they did some other stuff, but they just weren't able to really make money with it. And so they ended up tearing it down and putting in games and concessions that made much more money.
So what were the years?
So it was built in 1917 and it was torn down in 1975. And there's some great stories. Benny Goodman came here and flopped. He was a total failure because his music was too new, too young, and so he ended up too jazzy. He performed one night and it was a total flop. And in his biography, he actually talks about like it was his worst concert ever, and he couldn't figure out why Denver hated him so much. And someone was like, Denver's just not ready for that yet. And so Benny Goodman was a flop here.
And one of the ironies of that is the Jazz at the Troc series that were done in the Trocadero.
Yeah.
Years later, traditional jazz, one of the all-time great series.
Jazz at the Troc, actually they put out albums every year with the songs.
Fantastic.
And they used to have a thing, it was called Sunday Night at the Troc, and they would actually broadcast live on KOA radio.
Yep.
And back in the day, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, I don't understand it, but AM radio carried a lot further. There was a lot less interference.
50,000 watt voice at the rock.
Yeah, exactly. And so back in their heyday, the Sunday Night at the Troc, the signal could carry. They covered about 30 states, so the western half of the United States could all listen to live jazz from Elitch's on every Sunday night. So yeah, it was a big deal.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So then that brings us to 1918 and 1919 when the park was closed during the war and due to the recession. It was 1923 before opening the season. Several major renovations were completed. The balcony was raised by 4 feet. The rise of the main floor was elevated. 300 seats were eliminated actually to allow more room between the aisles and rows of seats. Now, myself being on the tall side, I'm not very comfortable in those seats. My knees hit the seat in front of me, but people were a lot smaller then too. Okay, so 1928, as Greg already said, the carousel was sold to Kit Carson County. 1936, Mary Elitch passes away, and of course she's buried with John out in Fairmont. In 1940, the first floor seats were replaced with the new leather upholstered seats, which remain today. Many changes came to the theater in 1954 from the generosity of Helen Bonfils. The large sky fly house in the back of the stage, which we'll go up and look at. It was the biggest one of its kind back in those days. She also housed dressing rooms with hot and cold running water, a prop department, a carpenter shop. Electrical, plumbing, and upgrades were made to the theater, including footlights on the stage, state-of-the-art hemp rigging, tied up all the catwalks, screen paintings. So this woman did so much for Elitch Theater. 1963, with the burgeoning popularity of television and movies, the theater switched from 63 years of summer stock to successful star-centered performances. 66 to 69, ticket stubs from these dates were found in the old wall, and prices were $3.90 and $4.25. 1975, the Trocadero Ballroom was torn down, which we've already talked about. 1978, the theater was added to the National Historic Registry and was also stated to be the oldest summer stock theater in America. 1987 was the actual last season for the Elitch Theater. The summer play started out with the play of Nonsense with Mary Jo Catlett, and it also ended that year with the same play. But in 1991, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the theater, they reopened for a special run of the show, The Robber Bridegroom, starring Patrick Cassidy. And then the theater closed and sat vacant for 11 years. And 94 was the last year for the amusement park, and 95 is when they switched to downtown Denver.
We'll have to, when we go on the stage, one of our board members, Roberta, who was with us earlier, she was in that final production of Robert Bridegroom. That was the final show done here prior to it closing, and so yeah, she was hung out with Patrick Cassidy. He was the star of it. Shirley Jones was here, and she actually watched the show. So we're gonna head up to the stage. Any questions before we head up, though? Any questions there? So we're going to head up to the stage. Because we have a production going on, there are wires and props and things everywhere. It's a show that mostly has young 20-something actors, so you will see their dressing tables are a mess. And not that adults wouldn't do it too, but it definitely looks like the kids took over. And so watch your step as we walk around, because there are cords running everywhere. We're going to go down this hallway. There's a little bit of a lip to it, and so just there's like a 2-inch lip at the end that you step up and then step back down onto the stage. So just watch your step as we head down the hallway here.
And you know, this theater has a step at the end of every aisle, so just watch your footing.
A little trip house.
You tripped on that very step.
I'm just surprised to see the second one. Oh, they did? Oh, okay. I must have been confused with another part of it.
So these are like some of the dressing rooms in here.
Oh,
It is off limits. Well, the big thing is we have to do a bunch of engineering reports before they'll let us open it up. Our architects assure us it's going to be fine and pass all the tests. But we before we can really open it and fully use it, we have to get elevators to go up there, and we also have to do restrooms up there, which it never had restrooms up there. So we've got a number of projects. For years, I was saying, oh, we got to get the balcony done. We got to get the balcony done. And finally, some really smart person said, let's fill these 650 seats first, and then worry about the balcony. So we kind of switched our priorities, and so the balcony has been put off for, it's probably about 10 years away before we get it finished. So generally, the biggest projects, the biggest phases of restoration, we've done grants, we've done federal grants, state historic fund grants, that kind of thing, private foundations. And so, yeah, it's a pretty big capital project to try to get that done. So we're going to have to earn the money before we can make that happen.
Is it private funding?
Yeah, most of it, we get some city funding, we get some Denver funding and all that, but yeah, most of our restoration work is done with private grants, and then the day-to-day, the operational stuff is just donors and supporters, people coming to tours.
Thank you very much.
You're helping pay our electric bills, so thank you. And so this is it's called either the Stage House or the Fly Building. The reason it's sometimes called a fly building is because they'll have props and scenery suspended from the ceiling, and then when it's needed in the scene, they'll fly it in for that scene, and then they'll fly it back out. And so that's why it's sometimes called a fly building. You can see there's a little platform up there. There would be someone up there. They would be running back and forth, tying things off and lowering them down when it's needed. So you see all the little spikes where they would tie that off. But yeah, this stage house is a little insanely overbuilt. It is gigantic. We get people from the Denver Center and Arvada Center coming in going, I would kill for all this space. And so, but it was actually Helen Bonfils who paid for this. So this is what you get when money's no object. You get an insanely overbuilt.
A trust fund?
I'm sorry?
Did she leave a trust fund?
So she didn't leave a trust fund, but she held the mortgage on this, and when she passed away, she forgave the mortgage, and so the Gertler family owned it outright after that. So she unfortunately didn't leave a trust fund. That would have been nice. But yeah, so she helped put the money into building this, and so this was built in the mid 1950s. So that's why it's a little newer. The cinder block and all, it's you can tell it's newer than the actual wooden theater building. One of the other kind of unique things is this back here. It's a paint easel, and below that big easel is a pit, and so the pit goes down about 20 feet, and so normally when you're painting scenery, you either lay it on the ground and paint, or you climb a ladder and you paint the scenery. This actually lowers down. That's what the big wooden wheel is. The easel lowers down into the ground, so you can just stand at regular height and paint, and then you raise it up a little more and paint some more and raise it up a little more. And so yeah, it's a really handy, really smart invention. I have my sad story about that is that I thought it was like this amazing special thing. We had this woman here. She was a theater expert, and she came in and she said, I've only ever seen 3 of those. There's one in London, there's one in New York, and now there's yours. And so for years on our tours, I would tell people this amazing story that this is one of 3 in the world. And then on one of our tours, someone is like, oh, Laredo Heights has one of those. And someone else was like, oh yeah, the theater downtown has one of those. I was like, oh shoot, it's not as special as I thought. But it's still pretty cool. Whoever came up with the idea, it's pretty brilliant. So yeah.
So as a child, I remember, I'm looking at some of these old props back here. The soldiers, they stood guard over Kittyland. I don't know if you guys ever remember that.
Because there's the sign.
You know, just so you can look around and see the different things that came from the old park. But I'd like to talk a little bit about the restoration of the building. In 2002, the Theater Foundation formed to pursue the restoration and preservation of the theater. So that was 2002. 2007, roughly $5 million was raised for phase 1 of the restoration, which included the meticulous, historically accurate reconstruction of the exterior of the building, which we've already talked about. And this included laying a concrete foundation under it. There was not a foundation under the theater before then. They did under the exterior walls, the roof, the gable, The main entrance and exterior walls were replaced and painted. From 2012 to 2014, Phase 2 was a $600,000 grant accomplished completing interior upgrades, including the addition of the lighting, plus health and safety upgrades, which included installation of fire suppression system. Thank God. This upgrade allowed the theater to get temporary occupancy and to begin be able to have tours and things like that. So those things had to happen before we could start generating some money for the upkeep of the place. 2020, following a horrible storm in 2018 that caused approximately $800,000 in damage. The board used insurance money and a grant from the Denver Urban Renewal Authority and a grant from the State Historic Fund to complete Phase 3, which included a new roof, new restroom, interior painting, and exterior landscaping. And then in 2022, the foundation offered free outdoor movie showings. So that was our start in our walk back into production. So 2023, the interior was sufficiently restored. We started having indoor movies and, tours and things like that. 2023 had high hopes for its Phase 4 progress, expecting to offer live shows in the summer of 2024, which
we did. And so, in fact, as we were sitting out there and we were discussing the Robber Bridegroom, and I mentioned we have a board member who was in it, Roberta, and I think Roberta, I always tell this story because I just love it, I think Roberta played a tree in a waterfall?
Yes, I did. With Broadway actors. Leo Burmester, who is no longer with us, unfortunately, but he was in The Abyss, the film The Abyss, but he was the original Thénardier on the West End in Les Miserables.
Oh, wow.
And he was on this stage with me, and then another Tony-nominated actor, Rachel DeBenedette, was also here. So pretty cool.
Yeah, I still want to see it sometime. I can't even imagine a tree in a waterfall. I love that. So.
Yeah, it's very cool.
So that was with Patrick Cassidy. The final show on this stage in 1991.
As 100.
As a celebration for the 100th anniversary. And then the theater closed up for about 10 years, and then it reopened. And so then, as Patty just said, last year, 2024, we had our first live theater, full live productions back on the stage. The first show was a one-woman show about Helen Bonfils, so that was a fitting reopening for our stage. And then the first major production, major show, major musical on our stage, Roberta actually directed and brought in her theater group to do Secret Garden. It was a wonderful show, like 40 actors. It was phenomenal. It was a huge
Did you
thing.
see it? Awesome. Yeah, it was very cool. Also, shameless plug, we're doing Annie in Highlands Ranch. So I gave you a card. If you want cards for that, let me know. But that's the end of this month, down there. So we like to say that we go from Highlands Ranch to the Highlands.
Yeah, so Wesley Players, they've now done 2 shows. They came back this summer and did the dining room. And so Wesley Players are in your neck of the woods. So if you can't make it up here for a show, catch them down there in your neck of the woods.
So I just wanted to do the conclusion talk about this. Okay, so now we've come to the end of our tour. Do you have any questions or comments that you would like us to try and answer?
We've heard rumors of ghosts.
See? Chris, you have to come talk about the ghosts. They're asking about ghosts. Well, first of all, did everybody, do this for Mary today? Everybody say, hi, Mary.
We do.
Come on. I hear you. Hi, Mary. She's definitely here watching over us.
Yeah.
So my ghost story is really about, so I used to live next door, and it's actually not been physically ghost seeing here, but I have heard of other people who have had that, but I've had a reoccurring dream of a very 9-foot tall person in the theater just staring down on me.
Oh.
And so, yeah, it's been very...
It was Harvey?
I don't know. But the other thing was, underneath this stage is where the sump pump is, and I had to change that, and so I was down there, and I had to come upstairs and get some tools and go back downstairs. And all of a sudden, a little kid's shoe, about this big, that was not down there when I was there first, was down there right next to where I was changing the sump.
And where you would have noticed it previously.
Yes, where I would have noticed it.
Wow. I have a ghost story too.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thomas's ghost story. This is 2 weeks ago. We were doing Elizabeth I in her own words. And we needed to create a smaller space. These pipe and drape things were all along the back walls. And so Chris and Thomas were here moving all of that stuff until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And Thomas, as he was locking up and left, he happened to look back over his shoulder, and his car was out there on the street. And upstairs is a dressing room and with this show, a lot of people are up there changing clothes and things, but it was empty. The whole place was empty. These two were the only ones in here that whole evening. And Thomas looked back over his shoulder, and all of a sudden, the lights up in front and in front of that dressing room, and the lights in the dressing room just kept flashing off and on.
And they were green lights.
Yeah.
Which we don't have green lights.
Oh. And he said he watched for like took a video and watched for like 3 or 4 minutes and said, "Okay, guys, I'm done."
Hey, maybe that's the answer. Right over there is where we had a lot of our actors standing for the secret garden, and we had a big trunk, and one of our actors was sitting on it, and he went, "What?" And everybody else was on stage, but there was a woman back here dressed in 1890 attire. Went right by him. He felt it. She went away. So we don't know, but it was probably Mary. And also one of our technicians, he drives a Tesla. Okay, he apologizes, but he does. But in any case, they came here, and we did all the tech rehearsals and then all of the shows and everything. In the back of a Tesla, there's an alarm kind of thing in case you forget that you have a baby. And so it says you have somebody in the back seat, right? And he said for the 3 months after they left here for the secret garden, that alarm went off. And then at 3 months or whatever, it just stopped. So he had a hitchhiker. Yep. I just wanted to mention that since you guys love history, this is this year's t-shirt. Did you show it to them already?
No.
Okay, good. And it has the original on the back. So these are $28. We have them in all sizes. If anybody wants one today before you go home, this is a nice historical piece. So very nice.
We do, like any good museum and tour, we do a little exit through the gift shop. We don't so much have a gift shop as a table, but yeah, we do. We actually, a lot of the tour a lot of the information and the stories come from Mary Elitch's biography. She had a biography that she helped write back in 1932, and it's very limited editions. Basically, when a copy comes available, it sells for like over $100. And so we finally worked with a lawyer and got permission to reproduce copies of her biography. So we have copies of that too, if anyone's interested. And,
I would just like to extend the welcome to anyone who would be interested in volunteering. This place is run by volunteers, a lot of it, and there's all kinds of things: tour guides, cleaners, set up for events, concessions that we sell. Any kind of volunteer opportunity is here. So please let us know if you're interested in that. And yeah.
I think we're good.
Just share
Any other
this
questions?
experience. Word of mouth is a good thing.
Any other questions or anything?
How is this heated?
massive building.
It's an excellent question because unfortunately it isn't. It never was. It was since it was in the middle of the amusement park. It closed up in the winters, and so it was summer only. It still doesn't have heat or AC, so it gets really warm. We are looking to do some kind of cooling at least. For next year, we're going to have. It did for a while, for many years back in the 70s and 80s. It had an evaporative cooler, so it was much cheaper. Because that's part of the problem. Trying to heat this or cool this building is mostly hopeless. And so, but an evaporative cooler is really cheap energy and really affordable. So we're hoping to do that for next year at least.
Volunteers are connected with the theater.
You know, we have our mailing list. We have about 300 volunteers, but there's probably about 40 that are really active and regularly here. We have a lot of folks. So for about 15 years, this has been all volunteers. Most of the restoration process. The first 5 years there was some paid staff, but most of the restoration process has been done by volunteers. Part of why it's taken 20 years is it's been a really slow process. But yeah, we rely heavily on volunteers. Our board is all volunteers, and so yeah, we have some amazing volunteers that make this place work.
They're all needed.
Yes. Anything else? Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming up, and thank you. As we said, your tour tickets help us keep this place going. So thank you much. So
spread the word. Anybody.